Natalie Kingston spent her whole life working towards an opportunity. And then one day, she got it.
It proved a lot to just myself, trusting your gut, being you. You're on the right track, working hard for all these years.
Being the sole cinematographer of a 6-part miniseries for Apple TV was the assignment. And she passed, like with flying colors, making Emmy history and proving to the world exactly what she's capable of. But how does someone with no TV experience land a job like this? And once gotten, how do they succeed this much? Answering those two questions is basically what this whole episode is about. And by the end of it, I think we get our answers.
It's such a marathon, and I loved being able to put in the reps every day in and day out for 93 days.
Where does that drive come from? I mean, this is such a deep question. You can pass on this one, but why are you trying so hard? Why does anyone try so hard at this?
Why does anyone try so hard?
Are you tired of talking about Blackbird yet?
Yeah, it's good. No, it's all good. I'm grateful to talk about it. But I have been talking about it for a while. So I try to find new things to talk about.
Yeah. It's funny, the first time I saw you ever, Natalie, was at the Film and Music Conference in 2017. You were doing a lighting workshop, and I was so fascinated by it at the time because I was really into grip and electric and all things lighting, obsessing over what a China ball is and when to use it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's one of the best tools. I love a China ball.
Well, gosh, where do I start with you, Natalie? First, thank you for being on the podcast. I totally binged Blackbird and loved it. It had one heck of an impact on me, and I imagine you as well.
Yeah. It was a pretty transformative experience. My first TV series. It was an incredible opportunity that really kind of came out of the blue. I just moved, I guess I was living in LA, moved from New Orleans, and I was in LA about a year and got the call, and they said they were shooting in New Orleans. They had no idea that I'm from there, but just happened to be, Louisiana, the tax incentives at the time. And I really wanted the job. I honestly thought it was pretty far-fetched that I would get it just because I didn't have any series work under my belt, and they wanted one cinematographer to shoot the whole series.
Wow.
And, so that's, a big step up. But I felt ready. But then how do you prove to people, it's most people have to see that you've done the thing that they're asking to do. That's how it works in the industry, as you know. And
what do you think's the thing that kind of sold them on taking the risk with you? I mean, because obviously you're more than capable of it, but like you said, you kind of have to do the thing before someone will hire you to do it. And you hadn't shot a series yet.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know. I know they liked, my vision for it, and they wanted someone from, feature film background. They really wanted to approach the project as, one big feature film. It's a pretty short, limited series. It's only 6 episodes. So, yeah, I think the fact that maybe I didn't have TV experience was kind of interesting, and then wanted someone with a different perspective. And yeah, and I really hit it off with the director. That was my first interview. And then he went to the showrunner and the producers, and after that, and said how much we hit it off, and we had a great chemistry. So yeah, I think maybe it was a combination of those things.
Yeah. What's something that was really tough in the beginning that you weren't expecting?
I guess just how fast it came together. I was I feel like I interviewed. It was the interviews all happened in 1 week, and then it seemed like the next week I was on a plane. Yeah, the next week I was on a plane to New Orleans and then starting prep, Fast and Furious. And I had maybe 5 weeks of prep at the beginning, and it was a very location heavy show. So most of that time was spent location scouting, really, and so it was just like, I have 6 different scripts. It's not just like a feature with one script. It was really, a learning curve of like, okay, I can't possibly focus on the whole series at once. And, the director and I were just like, it was also his first TV series. He comes from feature films as well. So we were like, let's just take, the first chunk, and then, the visual language will start to unfold as we shoot, and we'll know what to do. And we knew we had a little break in between, kind of 2 blocks, like the shoot was divided in half in the beginning, but it ended up working out a different way. But yeah, so we knew we'd have a little time to kind of prep some bigger stuff at the end. We saved all the prison work for the second.
Yeah, prepping something so big, where do you even start? Like, what's the first thing? Like, you wake up the morning, it's time to start prepping. What do you do?
Yeah, you just, you really just, like I said, location scouting was like, took up the majority of our time and my time. So it was really just like looking at these locations, letting them sink in, and seeing how they were speaking to me and how they wanted to be lit, and not going against them, which I do anyway, but not working against them, and just finding the perfect locations for this story, and let that do a lot of the heavy lifting. But it was really prioritizing bigger scenes from kind of the first chunk, and storyboarding or shot listing that stuff, and then the more kind of standard stuff would just fall into place.
And the Emmy goes to Blackbird, Natalie Kingston.
We'll get philosophical later, but right now I just want to jump right in and talk about shooting your first series, the Apple TV miniseries that won an Emmy for cinematography. How does that feel?
It still feels quite surreal. I mean, just to be nominated was just like, whoa, wow, and I did not think I was gonna win that night, and it proved a lot to just myself of like, okay, you're on the right track with kind of really, trusting your gut, being you, working hard for all these years, so it was kind of like a way to prove to myself, okay, keep going, not that, you need that validation, but sometimes, I mean, it does help. So to get that recognition was just, obviously a huge honor. But I didn't know at the time when I accepted the award that I was the first woman to win a cinematography, an Emmy, for any narrative category. I think there had been maybe 1 or 2 award documentaries. And I found out a couple of days later, and I was like, wow, first of all, I can't believe that. That's absolutely unbelievable and it's kind of sad. But also, I hopefully that can help open more paths and more doors, and for other females who maybe think it's impossible, to encourage them to keep going. And that really means a lot to me, because seeing early in my career, and still, but seeing those trailblazing women, just be so successful and just absolute masters of their craft was impacted me very significantly. And, it does make a difference when you can see yourself. And it really is motivation to keep going when you get discouraged.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, now that you've done this, what are you hoping for next?
Yeah, next, I mean, I would love to do another series. Also, I love shooting films as well. So it's really about working. It's the directors who really, it's of course the projects, but the director's vision. And so I just want to keep, partnering and finding new directors who have a vision that I'm inspired by and who are motivated to create a visual language. And directors who are visual and who want to tell stories that way, and so it's really about like focusing on finding those types of collaborators who take visual language seriously and who want to have that collaboration with a cinematographer. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say like a genre or type of story, because I'm open to so many things, and I don't want to get stuck into one type of thing. I like when my projects are diverse and I can try new things, and so yeah, it's the filmmakers who really inspire me, and hearing their visions and where they want to go with things, and how the two of us together can create something powerful and unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I know typically when you're working on a project, you're working with one director. But what was it like shooting this series with multiple directors?
Yeah, it was, I mean, at first, honestly, it was kind of nerve-wracking, after the first director did the first 3 episodes. So we were together for a while. And then it's like, okay, what is this new person going to come in who hasn't been here? How does that work? Are they going to try to change things? And but luckily, it didn't go that way, and it really fell into place. And they were very respectful of the material that we had shot so far.
Yeah.
Watched the edits and really understood what we were trying to do. So yeah, it was just as cinematographers, even from film to film to film, we're working with so many different types of personalities of directors and crew members.
Right.
But, so it's kind of, that, but then all in one project at once. So we're used to jumping from different directing styles.
I mean, even though there's different directing styles coming at you, the show seems pretty darn cohesive. Like, is that kind of your job, is to create unity between each episode?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When it comes to the visual language of this thing, how did you guys determine that? And what was it like to be the one to come up with that?
Yeah, it was, a collaboration of myself, Mikkel Roscom, the first director, and Dennis Lehane. And my big reference that I brought to the table was from Gordon Parks, the photographer, his series called The Atmosphere of Crime. And
Wow.
that really just inspired me on so many levels, with color palette, lighting, composition. I wanted to ride the line between this feeling like, a real prison and gritty and not so, perfect and contrived and, perfectly lit, just embracing, we shot in a real prison. So embracing what that prison looked and felt like. So that was the, intention with it. The idea was to also stay pretty subjective most of the time with the characters. I mean, this was essentially a two-hander between the characters Jimmy Keene and Larry Hall. So we typically wanted to be inside their conversations, usually on wider focal lengths. So it wouldn't feel like an observation with the audience's perspective further back.
Gotcha. Yeah. Let's talk about the eyes. Like, what tools did you choose to see through? Camera body, lenses, filtration, all that stuff.
Yeah, we shot on the Mini LF and the Panavision H series lenses, and no filters.
Nice. Clean. I love it. What about the large formatness of the Mini LF
Yeah.
helped you with this?
The wider field of view came in handy because we were in small spaces, so I didn't want to get into a too distorted look and have to go with a wider focal length, let's say on a Super 35 sensor, just the regular Mini. And so I could use a little bit longer lenses with less distortion if I was on large format. So because we were shooting in real prison, or a real prison, actually multiple, in the cells, it's so tiny in there. So that was a big driving force for using that format.
I don't know, even with camera movement, your approach to this is pretty subtle. Like, it doesn't call too much attention to itself. And I love that.
Yeah, that was, we really wanted a stripped down, simplified, a little bit classical, feeling. And I just didn't want to, how do I say this? Just overdo it and just make it feel like, so on the nose, or just trying to just reinforce emotion and tension. I just wanted it to be raw. And so we saved that camera movement, those push-ins or the whatever, however the camera was moving, for times that we really needed to. And so I was really, cognizant not to overdo it, because then it would just lose its potency. And so I felt like, and
Right.
also I feel like my personal feeling about sometimes of static cameras, sometimes that can bring more tension because it's not moving, and because the audience is just forced to sit there in a moment or in a scene, in an awkward scene. And we had a lot of tense scenes, very long scenes with Jimmy and Larry. And so just to sit there, very stripped down, very still and static, help to create that or enhance that tension that the characters were experiencing.
Absolutely. When it comes to the times in which you decided to move the camera, what tools did you guys use to move it so steadily, so smoothly?
Yeah, pretty much kind of a variety of tools, traditional dolly, we had cranes, we had small jibs, Steadicam, very little handheld. There were a couple moments. Yeah, those were, pretty, it just depended on the situation, the location, the camera move. Yeah.
Now, did you operate for this one? Because I know you typically like to operate in your work.
Yeah, I do, but I did not. This was the first project where I didn't operate. That was also a learning curve.
Yeah, what was that like? Yeah.
It would have been, I don't want to say impossible, because anything's possible, but it wouldn't have been the best way to go about this project. And I think some things would have suffered. We had 2 cameras most of the time. The second camera didn't always play if it didn't have to, but we wanted to approach it through a single perspective as much as possible. So yeah, I really needed to step back and orchestrate. And there's just so much more to do on TV. And the pacing is faster, and there's just, it was such a bigger project, and, again, 6 episodes to worry about and so many things to prep. almost like while you're shooting, many times, the rigging gaffer would come and swing by set to talk about, tomorrow or the next day's setup or something next week, and, that kind of stuff. So if I was stuck behind the camera, those little conversations would have been hard to have. So, and I had talked to, mentors and friends who've had shot a lot of TV, and everyone, recommended that I don't operate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it totally made sense. And it was fun to step back. And, at first it was like, okay, where do I stand? Where, I don't like to just be stuck in the DIT tent. So I work with my own Flanders monitor, and, that's all calibrated in sync with the DIT. And so it's kind of like my office. And so that has, it's 2 Flanders in this case, and, the iris wheels and my iPad. And so that was mobile. So I could be, right behind camera and because I like to be on set, and I want to feel, a part of it. And being so far back and so far removed is difficult.
I'm sure. Yeah. I like to be in the weeds of things as well when things are happening. I don't want to be, deep into a tent. What was the first scene you guys shot, and what was it like looking at your Flanders monitor and see the image move and you not be the one to make it move?
Yeah, the first scene we shot was in episode 1, in the conference room, when the detectives are interviewing Larry Hall, Greg Kinnear, and Paul Hauser, and the other detectives at that conference room. It was a little it was challenging because, like I said, it's like, where do I stand? And then we figure it out. And but my camera operators were people that I've worked with for a while, and I totally trusted them. And you have tastes of that when you work with Steadicam, where you don't operate as a DP.
Right.
But it did feel, it felt a little kind of wonky at first, just because it just wasn't what I was used to. But it didn't take long to sort of get into a groove.
Yeah, talk about that groove. I mean, this is a very long shoot. How many days was it?
I think we shot for about 92, 93 days.
Yeah. I know what it's like to be on a feature, and it takes time to get into that groove. And it's funny how it just kind of switches over. You kind of show up to set one day and you go, oh, I think we're in it. I think we figured the groove out.
Yeah.
At what point during this shoot did that kind of happen for you guys?
Oh my God. There were a lot of complex layers.
I can imagine.
But with camera crew and lighting, I guess it probably, took a couple weeks, which I feel like is what it normally takes, on a feature. Maybe the first week you're just like, okay, yeah, you can see where it's going. Then you can see what's working, what's not. Then by the second week, you really get into a groove, and it starts to become more of a flowing operation. But what was cool about this is just because it's such a marathon, and I did love that, because I loved being able to sort of put in the reps every day, day in and day out for 93 days. And it was fun to start to really dial in the little things, after you've lit an actor for so long, you start to see all of the little nuances in the way you can adjust, light and how it falls on their face. And you really, it's a great, study in that way. But you can really start to get into the fine details of things. And that was cool. And then just, I just love the shorthand that develops, with everyone. And
it's my favorite part.
Just so in sync.
I love that.
And you feel so free to try new things and different things and out of the box things. Or sometimes even on features, especially ones that are fast, even 25 days, that flies by, you know. It's like by, you know, the last week, you're like, oh my God, it's already, I feel like we were just getting into something and I want to try more. So this Blackbird was an opportunity to just like, to try more things and kind of experiment. And, you know, like I said, we saved the main prison work at that location for the second half of the shoot. And we were there for a few months. So day in and day out over there, you really learn the intricacies of that location, what works and what doesn't. So it's almost like when I first started lighting it, I had one approach, and then that started to shift for the better when I saw like, okay, this, I don't like this. Let me pivot this way. And actually this method of lighting, especially within the cells, you know, I learned a lot there. So I feel like the approach got better as we were in there longer.
Yeah. I mean, I spent a week shooting a documentary in a prison. What was it like? Talk to me about the psychological toll of being in prison for more than that. Months, right?
Yeah. Yeah, months. It takes a toll on you. Luckily, this prison in New Orleans was not operational. It closed down after Hurricane Katrina. So we didn't have inmates actually, you know, roaming around or just in their cells. But just even being in that environment, you know, it really, you know, not seeing much daylight. I mean, each cell had you saw a little bitty narrow window in it. So yeah, it's you it's a bit depressing and dark. I remember I would go in a cell block for lunch, eat my lunch, because I like to be, for films or, you know, commercials not so much, but films and for Blackbird, you know, it's such, I feel like I need my alone time at lunch and time to just sort of step back, collect my thoughts, reflect on the morning, what worked, what didn't, and just not hear anyone talk. And so the only way to do that is not sit with the crew or anyone else. Now, if the director or first AD wants to meet, then, you know, obviously we'll do that. But if I can be alone, then that's what I prefer. And so I would just take my lunch there and do a little meditation in the cell. It sounds quite depressing saying it out loud, but it really got me through.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about the heaviness of prison, I want to break down a specific scene with you in the wood shop here from episode 5.
Shit, Larry, I thought we were just talking. Is that what we're doing? That's what I'm doing. She got into my van just fine.
You know, I would say that this scene here is probably one of the most crucial in the entire series. I mean, this is where Paul Hauser's character, Larry, you know, kind of confesses to the crime.
Yeah.
What did you guys do here? You know, how did you block the entire day for this one scene?
Yes.
Okay. How many?
Did we do it? I feel like we did it in multiple. Wait. You know, maybe this scene was an entire day. We did have a rehearsal on a Saturday. There were a lot of things we needed to figure out. We wanted to rehearse with the actors. It was such a huge scene. They wanted to rehearse, you know, director wanted to rehearse, and we also needed to test lighting, and we had a lot of cues and with camera and lighting. So we needed to see how long Paul's monologue lasted, because the idea was the rain was coming in, it got, you know, the light outside got darker, and then it started to rain, so special effects needed to test. So we were all there, the whole crew, on a Saturday, testing this whole thing and timing it out and figuring out the approach.
Yeah, I think out of the 2 minutes and 18 seconds that this shot in particular lasts, where Larry confesses, there's like 2 shifts, you know? one of them is obviously the lighting. We go
Yeah.
from something warmer to something cooler. I mean, look, Natalie,
Exactly.
I think everyone watching this will relate to that feeling of a storm rolling in and things getting darker and the wind picking up. And you guys achieve that feeling here as his monologue gets darker. Technically, I mean, how did you guys pull this off?
Yeah, so we were on a stage, which is kind of the only way to have, full control. This was originally supposed to be shot on location, a location at the prison that looked exactly like this. It was like kind of like a wood shop.
This was a stage.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you didn't pick up on that. I'm always so like it's so obvious to me because I know, and it's always
But there's
cool.
layers outside. I mean, what's out those windows?
Yeah, that was a wall.
Wow, cool.
But yeah, it was modeled off of that exact location at our prison. So yeah, we built it. We had, I think I had 4 Arri Maxes out there through like light grid diffusion. That's right outside that wall, going through those windows up higher. And then on the other side of the diffusion, like right outside, like we'll just call it like a courtyard or corridor right up there, I had a huge softbox with multiple S60s. And so that created our ambient light, like a soft cloud.
Yeah.
And so we basically dimmed down on the ballasts that were DMXable on the Arri Maxes. We dimmed that down a full stop throughout those 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And then we also dimmed down on the softbox. And the color temperature, because we couldn't in real time change, the color temperature of the Arri Maxes. I think we did a little on the S60s, but then we really enhanced that color shift from warm to cool in the grade, which was easy to do. Yeah.
That's amazing. Dolly?
Yeah, I think we had like a little jib arm, like a GF8 on a dolly. So we could get, up and over the table and come into like a few feet away from Paul's face at the end here.
I see. How many takes do you guys think you ran on this one?
That's a good question. It wasn't like a ton, maybe like 7-ish, give or take. And we all knew when we nailed it. It was such a celebration. We all, the crew, we just felt it. Like it was, one of those amazing filmmaking things when literally everyone is coming together, dolly grip camera operator, the gaffer and key grip and special effects and actors and, everyone has to be on cue and precise. And, obviously, Paul's not a robot, so he's not going to deliver the monologue exactly the same way every time. It's going to be we knew roughly about 2 minutes, but everyone still had to be very present and camera had to end at that position exactly when, he ended. But yeah, we all felt it and we knew when we nailed it, and it was sort of this rejoicing time with the crew and the actors. And yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, what a dance. Much deserving of celebration after nailing that. And, not to take away from Taran's character, Jimmy, and his performance. I mean, he's incredible. But I was really struck by Paul's performance for Larry. I talked to friends of mine who have also watched the show, and that seems to be the thing that stands out, is just how, his character just stuck with me. Let me say that.
Yeah, he's amazing. He deserved the Emmy for sure.
You remember why? Why are you asking? Shit, Larry, I thought we were just talking. Is that what we're doing? That's what I'm doing.
In this scene, there's also a shift where we change up our angles a bit. You know, Larry says, why are you asking? You know, and something happens. What did you guys do there to cause that feeling?
Yeah, when we're like closer to him and more straight on and a tighter eye line, right?
Yeah, this shot here, I mean, because he's not actually looking at the camera, is he?
No, it's very close. I mean, he's probably looking at, I mean, Taryn was probably like right over it, or we might have had him look at a mark on the map box for that. You know, we almost wanted to feel like it was in camera. And that was obviously intentional. And it was like, okay, here's where it's shifting. Here's where it's getting real. And is he going to go there? and is he like catching on to Jimmy? You know?
Whose call was that? Was that the director at the time, or was that something that maybe you have pitched?
Yeah, it was Joe Chappelle, the director. And I love that. And it's those things that I was talking about earlier, which, you know, aren't hard to do. They aren't flashy, but they're impactful and they're simple and sort of stripped down. But the choice of when to do that can be very effective.
I think if you're too theatrical 100% of the time, I mean, it's stunning to look at. Big camera moves are stunning to look at, but when you choose to be reserved and then you decide, okay, here's the moment, we're going to do something different, it really stands out and makes an impact, I think.
Yeah.
I want to, the rain. I want to cover the rain on this. Did you guys practically use rain outside? Because you can see the rain on the windows eventually. Yeah,
we had a rain tower. Special effects brought in rain towers that, you know, covered the span of the windows. So like, you know, they had to make it start raining on the cue as well.
See.
And then the practical lights came on as well when it started to rain outside.
Oh, wow. I want to talk about this next scene here in this this TV room where a fight happens.
You want to change that back?
No, I don't.
This shot in particular, I love this establishing, this like trucking shot that you guys did. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, this was again Joe Chappelle who directed this one, and so it was all about just bringing, you know, this. So this is the first time Jimmy had just basically met Larry earlier in the episode, and so it's this kind of cat and mouse thing, and so he's like literally kind of, you know, following him all over. He just met him in the medicine line, and then Larry was kind of standoffish, and so Jimmy's trying to just, you know, he's on a timeline, and so, you know, his challenge is trying to befriend this guy in a quick way, but then not come off too obvious, you know, because he wants to get out of prison. So he follows Larry to this TV room. They have their, you know, nightly routine of watching America's Most Wanted. And so here's where Jimmy decides that he's going to prove to Larry that he could be a true friend and have his back in, you know, in prison when this other dude comes in and changes the channel.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell he was strategic about it, because I mean, Jimmy was the one to hit first.
Yeah. And so it was like too much too soon in his part, you know. He was like really over the top. But it did, as you see, you know, in the end, when we kind of end with Larry, it did make an impression on him of like, okay, who is this dude?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So this was actually in the prison, or was this studio as well?
This was a stage as well. This was on the, so yeah, this part is the mess hall where the inmates eat. And then this little TV room, which is, you know, on the side of it. So the time of day is supposed to be like, you know, sunsetty, end of day. But I didn't want you know, this kind of magical, warm, beautiful light pouring in. But there needed to be a sense of like, this is the end of the day. And I wanted to build contrast. So just, you know, I felt like with harder light, directed towards the kind of the bottom half of the room. What I ended up doing was skip bouncing from those windows of the mess hall. I think I had 4 or 5 18Ks skip bouncing outside into the mess hall, and then somewhere you can see on that wall on camera left when we're inside the TV room, facing the TV, just spilling hard on the wall right there. So the idea was to keep it pretty dark and cavernous, you know, but having that sort of like misdirected light to build contrast and to just make it feel, you know, like I said, just like the end of the day, but not too beautiful. That makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, the way, even here, the way it's hitting, you know, Taron on his face, it's like really soft and indirect and beautiful. But I notice you never really see the light source, where the light's coming from.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's from that. You can't see the windows. Yeah, we don't see the windows at all, but that's all skip bouncing. So what I did was, like, for close-ups, the 18Ks were just going into the ground. And if I needed just a little more oomph, then I would bring in like some silver right on the bottom, you know, kind of out of frame, and then just enhance that skip bounce from the window.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. I want to talk about how you guys, you know, once the fight breaks out and gets pretty intense, you do this really classic thing where the camera seems to be like inside of the ground while Jimmy is punching this guy. How did you guys pull this shot off?
Yeah, we raised up the prisoner on a box.
Nice.
That inmate that he's punching, so we could, you know, get higher. But that's really it. It was pretty simple.
Yeah. Did you guys use any stunt doubles for stuff like this?
Yeah, so this guy, our stunt coordinator was fantastic. This guy, Walker, the inmate, he is a stunt performer. So
nice.
Yeah, he did it all.
That's awesome. That's really helpful when the person acting is also a stunt performer.
Yeah.
I want to break down this next scene here in solitary confinement. Did you guys move a wall?
Yeah. Yes. So we had so this is the real solitary confinement in our real prison location.
Okay, got it.
Very glamorous, right? The ceilings were extremely high, which worked in our advantage, so we can, you know, mount that camera up there. But yeah, we had 2 identical cells, one where we broke the wall, where we could get a little bit wider, you know, camera kind of right outside there. And so one cell had the full blood map on it. And so Taron could just trace his hand, and VFX could erase whatever blood wasn't supposed to be there.
Cool.
And then the other cell was completely blank.
Gotcha. I was wondering that because this overhead rig is really cool. I mean,
just like just speed rail, camera underslung. I lit the whole thing with a tweenie. That's it.
That's amazing. I love the simplicity of it.
But that's when it really, you know, pays off to be large format, to use slightly longer lenses, because, you know, again, I just didn't want to get so distorty in these small spaces, especially like when we didn't have the wall gone and we had to stay within those 4 walls.
Yeah, I can totally see how large format would afford you that, especially in these cramped spaces. What focal lengths did you lean on? Did you like for this?
35, 40, 50 were the heroes. Yeah.
There's this other scene in the jail from episode 1, I believe.
Yeah.
Where was this location? Did you guys use the same location and just kind of doctor it up differently?
No, so this was another prison in New Orleans. It was close by our kind of bigger main prison set. But yeah, this was, again, not an operational one, just kind of used for shows to shoot in. I think we did paint the walls. I can't remember, honestly. Yeah, but it was really, the bones of this were cool. It was great texture. It was a great location.
So beautiful. How did you get light in on their faces on these close-ups? It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, so I had HMIs through the windows, coming from the side. And then I placed smaller units, probably like sky panels, closer to them to just carry that light coming through the windows, just off camera. Yeah, and then we had, fluorescence, the practical fluorescence on as well.
Wow. Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. You seem not to be afraid to mix lighting temperatures. Can we just talk about that? Because you've got in this one scene, you've got fluorescence, daylight coming through the windows, and even in this case, you've got like a warm tungsten-y practical light. It's a great looking image, but it's got a lot going on color temperature wise. Can you just kind of walk me through your philosophy there?
Yeah, that's real life. You never just have one color temperature coming in, at any given time, usually. And so that to me, that just makes it more complex and layered and just, it makes it feel less contrived and like it's, like it's real life. And that was like a big thing that struck me with the atmosphere of crime. Gordon Parks' series is, he photographed in a handful of prisons around the country I think it was the 50s. And these are just real spaces. And he's just, finding this kind of beautiful, but gritty lighting in these prisons. And it was always, you're going to have fluorescent lighting in prisons and maybe, tungsten practicals and maybe a little bit of daylight. So it's always going to be a mixture of those things. And I love how different color temperatures and qualities of light can play with one another and mix. And to me, that feels more photographic and also more painterly in a way, because it's not just like one stroke. It's so many things coming together and blending in a complex way.
Yeah, it feels very real. Like I'm in there when I see it, and I think your approach to that contributed to it, as opposed to being like so theatrical with your lighting.
Yeah, because there's a fine line. I think it would be like, you're in a prison, and if it was too sculpted, if there was like haze, and it could get it could get really artificial and and non-believable. But and this was just very simple. This was just light coming in through that little strip of a window in his cell, and then I had a bounce card on camera left, right below his face. Just returning that light in from the window, and then that practical light, and that's really it. And then those overhead fluorescents behind Jimmy.
Yeah, how did you tame those? I imagine the whole building was just full of those fluorescents.
Yeah, and of course, they're not. It's either all on or all off. So that was a bit tricky, but the grips came up with custom cutouts for each unit. So indie gels, diffusion, and solids that were affixed via a very strong magnet. And so, say I wanted all the lights on camera left or behind camera off, then they would go in and snap up solids and keep on the other ones, you know, in the foreground.
This outdoor prison yard. Talk to me. Obviously, it's a practical location, but pretty
Yeah.
iconic. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah, that is a tough location. So again, we're in Louisiana in the summer, which, if you don't know, it's brutal. It's A, so hot, and B, the light changes just like every few minutes. You know, when you know, it rains almost every day in the summer. And it could be also sunny at the same time. You never know when it's going to rain. It's just completely inconsistent. Or it could be overcast, it could be sunny, it could just be like everything. So controlling the light in here was a huge challenge. We ran, you know, diffusion overhead. And so it was really just kind of doing that, you know, with grip. And it was just, you know, from each building side to side, you know, huge canopy of diffusion.
So this frame here is like a full sunny day, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you guys have the diffusion over top?
We probably did at this point. Or it could have been, I mean, the sea cloud, you know, it could have been diffused by clouds, or because it was very on and off these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the very first scene in the series opening. Beautiful, iconic. What did it take to get this?
Oh yeah. So I've like I told this story before, but so this we almost lost, which it makes me sad thinking about if we wouldn't have had this, of the series not starting this way. But so this was scheduled. This location we shot at during our very first week of shooting on the schedule. And we had a lot of work at this location. And so we saved this stuff for last, but it started raining, so we couldn't get it. So we had to punt it. And this location was like an hour outside of the city, so it's quite hard to get to. So it kept like getting punted further and further down the schedule. And then it like got to the point where it's like, okay, are we gonna get it? And you know, they were cutting this episode they were cutting all episodes as we were shooting. And so they ended up putting in a placeholder here with some other stuff that we'd shot with her and the bike in this location. But, you know, it was very overcast. It wasn't this scene. It wasn't what it was supposed to be. And they were like, yeah, no, you know, showrunners like, yeah, I think this works. You know, this tells the story. And, you know, I don't think we need to go back and get it. And so this was one of the battles that I chose to fight. And I was like, no, we must get it. We have to have a strong opening. And, you know, I firmly believe this. And, you know, even if we do it, you know, the very last day, we need this sunset. And I promise it's going to be worth it. And so the line producer's like, okay, yeah. And so it was the very last day. And luckily, it probably rained that whole day before. Then we had this magical sunset.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I remember we had to like fly in. I think this was a 30 or 45 foot crane. New Orleans was so busy that year that all the cranes were booked, and so we had to get a crane from Atlanta, and like, you know, it was a lot of moving parts. You know, travel back to this location, and hope and pray and cross our fingers that we'd get a magical sunset. So
when you say fly in, did you mean like literally fly in the techno crane?
Or drive it in.
Okay, that's the term we use on set. It's like fly this in, fly that in.
Yeah, but it was like a whole thing, but so worth it. And yeah, I was just so happy we got this day, because I think it just really made a difference in how the show opened. It wouldn't have been the same.
No. And even this camera move, I mean, I feel like you could have done this with Steadicam, but not really. I mean, the techno really.
No, it would have, you know, you'd had just to get it that stable. And then also this, you couldn't have done this rising up at the end too.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Random question, the series intro, were you involved in that?
Like the opening credits?
Yeah.
No, but it's cool. It's very like 90s, huh?
Yeah, it's cool. But I was wondering, it's like, because I mean, let's face it, every good series has a good intro, a good opening, a good credit sequence, title sequence.
Yeah.
How often is the cinematographer of the show involved in that? I don't know.
Sometimes they are. It just depends what it is. But no, I had no idea what it was going to be. But I like the direction that they went with the VHS footage. And yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Another random question, going back into working with multiple directors, that's pretty common to have multiple directors come into a series.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think we do that?
In TV?
Yeah.
Because of the schedule. And it's because there needs to be multiple directors. So, one is shooting while the other one is prepping. And so that the train could keep moving along.
Gotcha.
And that's why there are multiple DPs too, usually.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you think it was odd that you were the only DP?
No, I mean, it's not like, I mean, that does happen. I think especially for limited series, it does make sense. And it was the approach that they wanted to take, from the beginning of having kind of a unified look. Yeah, so I think it did make sense. And it was a shorter limited series, so it wasn't like 10 episodes. And the schedule was structured in a way where it was doable. I got to break, after Mikkel's episodes, we had like a little small break, like a week, and I prepped with the second director and the same thing with the third director.
Yeah. Okay, zooming out, Natalie Kingston knows exactly what it's like to be on set with 5 people for a commercial, a music video, a short film. What's the difference? I mean, really kind of just break down to me like what the difference is between working in that way and working in the way that you did for this series.
I guess it's just kind of like the infrastructure is a little different from the different mediums. With commercials, obviously you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but then TV you can as well. Commercials, you have client, agency, director. TV, you have the showrunner entity, which doesn't exist in films, and usually like kind of more producers. And so there are a little more voices, and I'm not just answering to the director. But like, something like, let's say a small music video can be very different and very freeing with just a few people and just like, the director and the crew, and very intimate. Same thing for like an indie film as well. But the nuts and bolts are still the same. Like the job is still the same. I think it just boils down to how heavy politics play into the project. You know what I mean? How many, the bigger the project, the more people you have to communicate with. And, the more you have to, I guess, communicate and over communicate, because it needs, communication needs to hit all of those appropriate departments. It's more people to manage. I guess at the top of my head, that's kind of a few of the differences,
Yeah, that was definitely a big question to ask, because there's so many aspects to everything. I mean, you have an amazing career of shooting commercials, music videos, short films, documentaries, but now that you've gotten the chance to shoot something like this at this scale, do you like it? Are you is it better? Is it something that you're inspired by?
I wouldn't say, I don't want to use the word better because, but at the same time, I do want to do it again. You know, it's, like I said earlier, I like the diversity of different types of projects and different scales of projects, you know, because it gives you something different. You know, what Blackbird gave me, it did fulfill a lot creatively and artistically, but also like it was very freeing because I had so many resources. I had all the crew that I needed. And so I was able to achieve so much in that way, you know, especially like an independent film, you get that intimacy, and, you know, usually more creative freedom. And, you know, it's just you and the director. I mean, of course, the other collaborators, but there's no, you know, there are less cooks in the kitchen in a way. And so that's nice too. Yeah, so it's just I like navigating all the spaces, you know, because I think it would get quite boring, quite old, just kind of doing just TV, you know, all the time. And while I do want to do another series, I do want to break that up, you know, keep breaking it up with films and commercials. I think it would be hard to just exclusively do TV because they're so long, and so going from TV project to TV project, I think would just take a toll. So it's nice to, you know, be able to break up those longer, you know, TV series projects with a film or commercials. And so, yeah, that's another reason why I like to keep, you know, my foot in all of those areas.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk about payoffs, right? What do you get out of your career that isn't the final work? I mean, I think as filmmakers, a lot of it does come down to the final work and what it does and how it turns out. But what do you get out of this whole process that isn't that?
I think it's just the amount of things I learn from each project about, you know, the craft, you know, the things I would do differently, from the failures, or, and just the things I learn about myself as a person, and are just, you know, that's some of my biggest takeaways. And I think, you know, filmmaking has definitely helped me, you know, grow as a person throughout all these years. You know, it's, you know, with filmmaking, you're just thrown into just different situations so fast, and you just have to figure it out. And that's kind of the essence of it, you know. And I think that's a good life skill to have, you know, and to be flexible, to be open-minded, to be collaborative, to be able to communicate, you know, all of these things are just good skills to have, just being a human being. And filmmaking has like helped, you know, it's assisted with that. Yeah, and I think, was the question, what do I get out of this? I don't know if I'm on a tangent.
Yeah, we're getting deep here.
Yeah. Being able to communicate emotions with imagery is like what I get off on the most. And to be able to create a visual language, a different visual language for each project, that is inspired by the story, inspired by the characters. And, you know, that visual language, you know, can hopefully move audiences in a way where they can see life differently. They can see another type of person in a different perspective. Like, that's ultimately like what I totally get off on and why I do what I do.
And it's funny how much, I mean, speaking of visual language, how much prep we do to try and determine that before we hit the record button, right?
Yeah.
What percentage of that do you think is found along the way?
Mm-hmm.
And what percentage of it is determined up front?
Yeah. The more I do this, the more I just want to discover much of it on the day. And I think it's good, of course, to have a plan and yes, to know the sort of concepts, visual concepts that will make up your visual language going into something, whether that's a type of lensing or type of camera movement.
What are examples of those concepts?
Like I said, perspective, what kind of, we're going to be in longer lenses. Is the camera going to be moving a lot? Are we static? Those kinds of concepts. What is framing say? It's like, those things going into it. And then it's just, it's letting those ideas sort of like seep into your subconscious and then just coming out in an organic way when you're on set, and not trying to over plan it or over prescribe, of just, does that make sense? Having those concepts, having kind of like the words to your language in your back pocket, and just knowing whenever it feels right, employ those things, and just more of like reacting to what you're seeing on the day.
Yeah, once you've determined that, like with this series, are you ever having to protect it? Especially when other ideas from other directors who are new might come up?
Yeah.
Are you ever having to advocate for the visual language?
In Blackbird, not so much, but I mean, I know that happens in TV, so that's been my only experience. But
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, the other two directors were pretty much on the same page, so they didn't come in try to change the lensing or perspective or anything like that. They very much fell into what we were already doing.
Gotcha. Nice. It was a tricky way we were shooting because a lot of it was block shot because of locations and actors' schedules. So we weren't like shooting a full episode, completing it, and then going to the next. Whoa.
Yeah. It's complicated.
You said this thing earlier. You said having to just figure it out. And I know what that's like, where you're on set and you have a task and you're like, we got to figure this out. Like, we got to do this. And you're insanely driven. I think you have to be in order to achieve what you've achieved. Mm-hmm. But where does that drive come from? I mean, this is such a deep question. You can pass on this one. But like, why are you trying so hard? Why does anyone try so hard at this,
I mean, why does anyone try so hard? Why do I love doing this. And it's been, since I was like 12, was when I first, I was the kid that got my hands on my parents' VHS camcorder. And, and that just, when I started making those little movies with the neighborhood friends and stuff, it just wouldn't leave me. When I would show these little movies to my family and see their reactions, and it just like affected me so much. And I just became obsessed with the idea of just creating things behind the camera, being the person behind the camera, and seeing how what I created could affect people in any given way. And so cut to now that I get to do this as a grown-up and people pay me, it's still pretty surreal to me, because it's like, and no one, I grew up in a really small town in Louisiana. And so it's not like I grew up in the film industry. We didn't really watch movies. My parents never watched movies. We went to live theater and watched plays and musicals all the time. But it was just like something that came, I don't know, I guess was kind of intuitive. It was like maybe what I took from watching all of these plays and musicals and combined that with the camera So it was like how I felt as an audience member watching these plays, you know, and if I could do that with this thing, this tool, that was just another kind of part of my toolbox now. I don't know, something that was just fascinating to me. And so I think that's, you know, why I work so hard, because it's just, I don't know what I just love it. It's just my passion. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, it's hard to ignore the fact it's easy to try so hard when you just love it so much, you know? I mean, it's funny you go right back to being a kid, because I do too. I mean, I was that 10-year-old kid with a VHS camera on their shoulder, you know? And anytime I'm, as an adult, creating the way that I want to, this thing that I felt when when I was a kid will pop back up, and I'll go,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, this is clearly me doing what I love the
Exactly.
most,
Yeah.
you know? But there's
Yeah.
also the stuff we have to do that isn't the stuff that's going to give us that bliss, that joy, that childlike,
Yeah.
joy that we had.
Yeah.
You know, how do you, I mean, talk to me about the stuff you don't want to do, right? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, some things you do to, you know, pay the bills, and but it's still like those things. It's like, yeah, some things, those projects maybe aren't the most creatively fulfilling, but there's always something, you know, that I could take from it. There really, really is, you know, and whether that's like working with someone new that I've been wanting to work with, like a crew member or something, or trying out a new light or new lenses, or, you know, there's always a way to take, you know, mid projects for money or whatever, to something where you can actually get a lot out of, you know, but you have to like create that. So, and then like even with Blackbird, you know, being on such a long schedule, you know, it was exhausting. And it was hard at times. And something that I remember thinking on the very last day was like, you know, I was so ready to, you know, it was very bittersweet. I was ready to be done because it was so long and I was exhausted. But then at the same time, I didn't want it to end. But, you know, I knew, as exhausted as I was just like, I could keep doing this, and I can't wait till I can do this again. And so that told me like, okay, I must really love this. So that was a good feeling, you know, to know that you're in the right place doing the right thing.
100%. God, that's such a great feeling.
Yeah.
What is left to learn for Natalie? Like, what do you think you have to learn
so
next?
Much. So much. I mean, I feel like I'm just at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, just there's so many ways that, you know, I want to improve my craft, and also just, you know, the way your perspective shifts just as a human being, you know,
Yeah.
and that's ever changing. And so inevitably your perspective will shift, and as an artist. And, you know, I'm going through a transition right now, about to enter motherhood very soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that's a huge shift. I know my perspective's going to change as an artist, as a cinematographer, for the better. And I'm excited for it. And I feel that shift, you know, and it's exciting. And I feel like it's going to be more of letting things go, embracing the imperfect, you know, not being as precious. Because I think that's going to be motherhood too. So yeah. It's happening in tandem, and I'm excited to see, you know, when I do go back to work, you know, how my perspective has shifted, how I work maybe a little differently.
Yeah. It seems big things are happening to Natalie in this season of life. Has it ever been stagnant for you?
Yeah, there've been feel like there are always seasons of that or spurts of time, you know. Yeah, it's like stagnant in terms of how, like, explain that a little more. Like, what do you mean?
Okay, I hit like 3 years of my life where I didn't really do anything. You know what I mean? Where I kind of like just treading water, you know?
Career
I was
wise
unhappy.
or just in
Both
general?
career,
Okay.
like career wise, 100%. Emotionally as well, you know? Have you, let's just stick to career if you'd like. I mean, have you hit a point in your career where things have been kind of stagnant and you haven't been like growing as much as you'd like, or no?
Um, yes. Yeah. Let me think. Well, like right now, I wouldn't say it's stagnant because it's like I'm taking time off intentionally because I have to and I want to, because to prepare for this baby that's going to come any day now. um, and there is a sense of like, of anxiety in a way of like, are people going to forget about me? Am I going to drop off the face of the earth? And like, when I'm ready to go back to work, what's that going to look like? Of course, I think of that, and so that's a whole new thing to think about and wonder how it's going to be like. But I'm just trusting the process, and this is what I have to do. So of course I'm going to do it, and it's all going to work out. But yeah, I mean, there are periods of time where it doesn't feel like I'm growing in the moment, but then always in retrospect, I am. When I reflect, I'm like, okay, I see why that happened that way. That taught me that lesson. That needed to happen exactly the way it did play out, to bring me to where I am now and to be in this perspective, that particular perspective in that given time. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah.
But yeah, and sometimes, you do a project and you're like, God, I thought it was going to turn out so differently. And, it would put me into a certain trajectory, but that's not happening the way I wanted it to. And then it's like, what do you do with that? Because as cinematographers, we're not fully in control, of really the projects we shoot. I mean, yeah, we're kind of in control what we can turn down, but what comes your way, it's really what, those are your options. And, so it's like seeing how, okay, what are the lessons from those situations, and why was I put into this situation? What can I take from it? And really being critical of my own work to see how I can grow and learn from, either mistakes that I've made or just learning from the situation in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think sustainability looks like in this career?
Sustainability.
I mean, let me elaborate. I think the film industry can take a toll on certain people.
Oh,
on some people.
Okay.
Right. How do you keep this, at the same time, let me say, I think we're really fortunate to be able to have this as a job.
Yeah.
It's insane. Right.
Yeah.
But I think there are certain things that, we can do to ourselves to maybe like overwork ourselves or, burn out. What's the definition of sustainability for you in this industry, working in this industry?
Yeah, I think it is trying to make the best decisions on what types of projects I choose and how that impacts my family, which used to be just, my husband now, but now we're going to add, and there's going to be a kid, so even more of that. And so, I mean, I always try to, be very intentional with the projects I shoot, especially long form, because it just takes takes me away usually, from home, and it takes a lot of time. So it's always been kind of a family decision too, that I discuss with my husband, the projects I take and the pros and cons, and what can I benefit from, and how is this going to pay off, and is it worth it, blah blah blah. So it's just kind of really taking each project one at a time, and really having those intentional conversations about is this going to serve me, is it going to serve us right now, and there are seasons when it's like really busy, where it's back to back to back, and there's some where it's like a little more of a gap happens in between projects, and it's just, you never know, and that's kind of what's hard, because it's so unpredictable. So I think it's just like always trying, also honoring like when I need recovery and rest, to recognize that, and trying to maybe take the time off when I need to, or don't take a project because it won't serve me, or maybe I need to conserve energy or something like that. Because there can be a true burnout, and then it's just like, what are you doing this for? Because you have to. It's hard, because it's like most filmmakers, we do this because it's our passion, and it's hard not to be a workaholic when you're so passionate about what you do. But then there's also life, and filmmaking isn't life. You're trying to recreate it, but you got to live life as well.
Yeah.
To be a fully, like a full artist, and have a perspective that's interesting, and full and complex and layered. It's just like being on a film set all the time. It's like, doesn't give you that.
Wrapping up here, we've talked a little bit about like learning, like the process of building ourselves throughout this journey that we're on, but lessons. Is there one that stands out to you, a lesson that you've learned?
Just along the way in general?
Yeah, I'll keep it vague.
Yeah, okay. I guess a big one that comes to mind is to listen. As a cinematographer, I think it's a very powerful thing to listen, to really listen to the director, and even though maybe they might have trouble articulating their vision sometimes, but if you really listen, you can pull from sort of the in-between as to what they're trying to say with their vision, if that makes sense. And
like in between what they're actually saying, you're kind of looking for what.
Yeah, like sometimes you might need to do that. Not everybody's like completely articulate in their vision. It might be in a more roundabout way, and they might give you a lot of anecdotes, and it could be there's so many different ways that the vision is communicated to you.
Right. I mean,
it's kind of through subtext, or the things they show you, or the things that they're attracted to. So it's kind of even like one step further than listening is just like being present in that. And I think really, really, truly listening.
That's huge.
Is huge. Yeah.
Last question. What haven't I asked you? Ball's in your court here, Natalie.
Oh gosh, what haven't I asked me?
What's on your heart?
I don't know. You've been so thorough. I feel like we've talked about so much. I guess maybe did you ask what's next? But I don't know what's next. The baby is
Yeah.
next, and that's like
The baby is next.
and that's what's
Yeah.
what's inspiring me right now. Maybe if that's a question, like what's inspiring me,
Yeah, it's a good one.
is
What is
just
inspiring you right now?
yeah, just kind of, preparing my mind and body, as much as I can for giving birth and entering this new chapter of life as not only a mother, but a mother who's a cinematographer, and how that balances out. And I'm sure it's going to be, a wild adventure.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. I'm excited to see how motherhood plays into, my perspective and my view as a cinematographer. And yeah, it's actually been really nice to kind of not focus on filmmaking right now, and just, be consumed with baby stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, I'm excited to see how you do it.
Me too. Yeah. I think there are a lot of parallels in filmmaking and in parenthood. Obviously I'm not a parent yet, but in filmmaking, you do all this prep work in the beginning, and you try to get as prepared as much as possible, to when you're finally on set, when everything can just go out the window because you need to respond to what the moment needs. And I think parenthood is going to be a lot like that, where right now I'm trying to prepare, and you have a vision what things can look like, but it's, I'm just going to have to be in it and present, with my child, and respond to what he needs, and just let go. And yeah, so.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Cool.
Okay, make me look good. I know I
did it.
stumbled.
No, so did I. I think Hey, Dylan here. Look, I'm trying to make this thing the best that it could possibly be, and I could use your help in the comment section. Leave me some feedback and be critical. I can take it. Also, if you would be so kind, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and it'll help me in my personal mission to make as many of these as possible. Thank you.
I'm telling the truth.